Welcome to The Quiet Truth, where lay Catholics work to undermine a hostile secular culture. I'm Tom Borek with today's installment, Undermining the Secular Culture, Part 2, How to Talk to a Sinner About Sin. Last time we talked about the way our culture tries to silence criticism of sinful behavior, and about our obligation as Catholics to stand up for virtue and against vice. I explained that we can be most effective when we are easy on the sinner and hard on the sin. Today we present our step-by-step guide. Think of talking to sinners as a two-part process. In Part A, we listen and learn. In Part B, we share information and ideas. The more time we spend exclusively on Part A, the more effective we are when we get to Part B. During Part A, listening and learning, we focus on a single goal, learning to tell the other person's story from that other person's point of view, so that that person will enthusiastically agree that we've got it right. Now, generally, when we disagree with someone, we restate their ideas in order to make them appear foolish. Imagine that you walk into a room and you just hear this fragment of a conversation, and one person says, "Okay, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. You're saying," what do you think comes next? Is the other person going to agree with that restatement of his or her ideas? Of course not. It's going to be some sort of distortion. The person is going to say, "So you're saying that no child can ever get emergency medical attention?" Or, "So you're saying that no Irish Americans have ever made a mistake?" Or, "You're saying that no one's entitled to freedom of speech ever." And obviously these are distortions of what the other person said. You don't want to do that when you're listening to somebody with an eye towards stating their ideas so they agree with them. Think of it as a game. To win, to get the other person to enthusiastically agree with your version of his or her story, learn the facts as the other person sees them. Learn the ideas that that person applies to the facts, and identify the emotions that are coloring that person's point of view. Try to state the facts, the ideas, and the emotions even more clearly than the other person did originally. At this stage, do two things and two things only. 1. Ask questions, and 2. Restate portions of the other person's story to confirm that you've got it right. Just those two things. Do not judge, criticize, argue, or correct. Do not offer additional facts or ideas. Do not discuss your emotional response to the story. Don't explain how, you've had a similar experience. Just play the game and play to win. I've facilitated dozens of trainings in these techniques for professionals and college and graduate students. Substantially all of my trainees have had difficulty staying on task during Part A. I'll post the rules on the board or on a screen with a video projector, and they'll say in big letters, "Do not argue, do not judge, do not criticize, do not correct, do not tell your story." And the trainees will be sitting there with the rules right in front of them as they go through the simulations. Nonetheless, smart, articulate students or even career professionals will repeatedly argue, judge, criticize, advise, correct, and tell their own stories. It really takes practice to overcome these tendencies, but it is worthwhile. When you develop this skill, when you can understand someone else's story and even make it clearer in terms of the ideas and the emotional content, when the other person responds to your statement of his story by saying, "Yes, yes, that's it, you've got it," you have a really powerful impact on that other person. I don't know what things were like 1,000 years ago, but in my world, nearly everyone wants this. They want to be heard without judgment, criticism, or advice. Being heard in this way makes us feel better. In particular, it makes us feel less lonely, because someone took the time and trouble to really understand what we were saying. Now, some people listen like this naturally, without any special training, and we are drawn to those people. They nurture us. We want to talk to them again and again. They are the essence of good listeners. Some people think that this kind of reflective listening is dishonest because we're pretending to be interested in subjects we might not otherwise care about, or maybe because we pretend to be interested in people who maybe they don't care about. But the activity is not at all dishonest. When we successfully listen to and learn a person's story from their point of view, we are not pretending anything. We really did focus our interest on the other person and learn about him or her in a non-critical way. We were not pretending. We actually did it, and the other person knows that. When an individual gets the satisfaction of being heard in this way, he or she is generally about as receptive to the ideas of the listener as he or she will ever be. Now, I'm not saying that everyone you listen to will be willing to listen to you. Certainly, I've listened carefully to many, many individuals who have never ever had any interest in listening to me. Nevertheless, completing Part A is the best possible way to start a serious conversation about a subject like this about which you may differ, and especially about a topic as serious and difficult as sin. Even if you don't change the other person's ideas in any other way, you will have one undeniably positive outcome. The person will have had a positive experience talking with a devout Catholic. He or she will have a very hard time dismissing all Catholics as judgmental fools or villains. When you think you're ready to start Part B, sharing facts and ideas, think again. You probably haven't finished Part A. Have you restated the other person's entire story with all the facts and ideas and emotional content that the person believes are important? Have you described the person's emotional reaction? Has the person enthusiastically agreed with your description of all of these elements? Unless you can say yes to these three questions, it's time for more listening, and sharing facts and ideas will be premature. Once Part A really is complete, you can begin sharing facts. Begin Part B. Again, avoid arguing, criticizing, contradicting, or judging what the other person has said. Instead, make statements that are not likely to provoke arguments, but that will stimulate some thinking. For example, instead of saying, "When you left your wife, you ruined your daughter's life," say, "When you left your wife, you had to spend less time with your daughter." Instead of saying, "You're headed for hell," say, "My church teaches that sex outside of marriage is mortally sinful." Or, "I avoid sex outside of marriage because I'm convinced that it's the kind of sin that can deprive me of eternal salvation." Don't expect to turn many sinners from sin, and don't expect to change many unbelievers into believers. What you can do is add a reasonable Catholic voice to the messages that are received every day by this individual. You will never know how powerful that can be. George Bernard Shaw famously said that when two people agree, one of them is irrelevant. His point was that the first person who articulates a different point of view is by far the most important. He or she is the one who forces the crowd to consider another idea. There is always the possibility, however remote, that the new idea will create a revolution. If the first person never speaks up, nothing can happen. And you can be that person. You can be the lone voice speaking in favor of the one true church founded by Jesus Christ and entrusted to the care of St. Peter and his successors. You need not be photogenic, nor a sparkling wit, nor well-read, nor master of public speaking. If you can listen and learn the stories of others, and then calmly assert your personal commitment to the faith, you will become an active part of the solution to the problem of the culture of death. So far in this episode, we've been focusing on the situation in which a Catholic chooses to advise, educate, or convert an individual sinner. But there are many other situations in which raising our individual voices is either required in order to avoid sin or helpful in containing the evils represented by the secular culture. Yet, the advocates for traditional Catholic morality sometimes seem to be few and very, very quiet. To be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, we must plan so that we know, almost without thinking, when it is that we must speak up. Then we must develop and nurture the habit for as long as we have the strength and breath to speak. I have personally resolved to speak up whenever I face one of the following situations. And this is true even when I'm listening to somebody and trying to follow the rules for part A. If one of these situations come up, I have to at least say something about the truth. So, these are the situations in which I have to speak up. When someone asks for my opinion about a sinful behavior, when someone asks whether I think he or she should engage in sinful behavior, when someone asserts in my presence that a behavior that I know to be sinful is good or positive or useful, or whenever there's a fair chance that my speaking up will help to educate, persuade, or convert someone. Whenever I fail to speak up in these situations, I'm disappointed in myself. I replay the situation over and over in my head and resolve to do better in situations in the future. Have I sinned? At times I certainly have. Whenever I was fully aware of the situation and my obligation and failed to act out of laziness or cowardice, then I have undoubtedly sinned. As my thinking becomes clearer, my obligations become clearer, and my duties expand. Thank you for your kind attention.